Lila Hastings clicked record on her phone's selfie camera, her eyes already reflecting a flicker of alarm. She lifted a delicate porcelain teacup toward her lips. A single overhead kitchen light cast a gold halo around the cup's rim. As she sipped, the taste on her tongue was more than bitter, it was strangely gritty, like wet sand trapped at the bottom of the cup. She paused, lowering the teacup and staring at it. Her pupils dilated visibly on camera. The phone, propped against a half-open cupboard, caught every nuance. Her first word was a whisper. "Something's off." She gave a small cough, struggling to clear the dryness in her throat. "I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a residue," she murmured, holding up the remaining tea for the camera. "This is the same calming tea my husband Gideon always insists on making for me. Lately, it's tasted scratchy." A wave of dizziness washed over her. The kitchen's edges blurred. Pressing a hand to her forehead, Lila stepped back and braced herself against the counter. She inhaled carefully, heart pounding in her chest. Gideon was a respected neurologist, a man who wore his white coat like a shining badge of authority. He was also her husband of 2 years, the person who vowed to protect her through every twist of life's path. Yet a creeping doubt had begun to color her every interaction with him. She blinked, speaking to the camera again. "I know that taste. It's not normal. It can't be. But Gideon insisted it would help me relax. If he's trying to help me, why do I feel so?" Her words trailed off as another wave of fatigue hit. She tried to steady herself but found her feet unsteady, her mind slow. In the hallway behind her, the floor creaked. Lila jumped, glancing over her shoulder. No one was there. She could see shadows playing against the far wall from the living room lamp, but Gideon was nowhere to be found. She took a shaky breath, then leaned into the phone. Her gaze was unwavering, almost pleading with any future viewer of this video to believe her. "Something's wrong with my husband," she whispered, as if the very act of saying it out loud might conjure him from around the corner. She ended the recording abruptly. The camera's final frame lingered on her anxious expression. In her mind, 1,000 questions spun wildly. When did she first notice the taste? Had he always been this controlling about her supplements and teas? Could she trust her own memory to piece these events together? Her knees buckled slightly. She managed to grip the counter's edge. Pulse quickening, she forced herself to stand upright. If she showed any sign of weakness in front of Gideon, she suspected he'd be at her side in an instant, offering more medicine, more mysterious pills, more reasons for her to doubt her own senses. Wrapping her robe tighter, she made her way slowly to the living room. The overhead lights flickered, or maybe her vision blurred once more. Heart-thudding, she kept repeating a silent mantra, "Stay awake, Lila. Stay alert. Don't let this take you down." That was her new reality, the quiet terror of not knowing who to trust, especially the man she'd once thought was her rock. It was as if the tea had become a symbol of everything hidden beneath the surface, gritty, strange, and possibly dangerous. In the corner of her mind, she resolved one thing with fierce determination: she wouldn't be a passive victim in her own life. If Gideon was up to something, she would find out. And if the cost of the truth was high, so be it. Yet as she drifted into a haze, the last thing she remembered was the grainy texture coating her tongue like fine sandpaper, and the echo of her own voice whispering to the camera, "This is wrong. This is so wrong." Lila's eyes opened to a disjointed reality. She was no longer in the kitchen but in her home office, perched on a stool in front of a half-finished painting. The brush rested in her hand, bristles stained with bright cerulean paint. She blinked at the canvas, an abstract depiction of a woman clutching her head in agony. It was her client's commissioned book cover, something she'd promised to finalize by tomorrow. Her phone's screen was lit with missed notifications. Her head throbbed, and she placed the brush aside, quickly wiping the paint from her fingers on a rag. Something felt off, as though time had stretched and snapped back in an instant. She glanced at the digital clock on her desk. 1:15 p.m. The last time she remembered checking the clock, it had read 12:05 p.m. More than an hour had evaporated. A spike of panic took hold. She fumbled for her phone to see a string of missed calls from her mother, a series of frantic text messages from a friend asking if everything was all right, and screenshots sent by her older sister, Audrey, who lived overseas. Lila opened the text thread from her mother. Mom, 12:45 p.m. Lila, are you okay? You just called me, but all I heard was muffled breathing. Mom, 12:50 p.m. call me back. I'm worried. It made no sense. She couldn't recall calling her mother at all. Her chest tightened. Had she blacked out? Sleepwalking? She always chalked up her occasional memory lapses to intense focus when painting, but this felt different, disconnected, forced, like someone had yanked that hour out of her life. She scrolled through her call logs. There it was, an outgoing call to Mom at 12:41 p.m., lasting 42 seconds. She clicked on the recorded voicemail message. On playback, all she heard was soft rustling, like the phone had been dropped into a purse or pocket. Suddenly, there was a faint moan, her voice, maybe? Then silence. Her hand shook. She glanced at the painting again. In it, the woman's anguished face was partially covered by streaks of white paint. Had she painted those details in the lost hour? The colors were too deliberate to be random brushstrokes. She realized with a chill that she couldn't remember painting them at all. She switched on her phone's front camera, intending to record a quick vlog entry for evidence. It's been an hour, she whispered, voice tense. I was finishing a commission around noon, and then... I don't remember. There's a call on my phone I don't recall making. My mother is worried. Guys, I don't know what's going on. A shadow passed under her door. She looked up, heart pounding. Gideon's voice came from the other side. Lila? You all right? He asked, tone edged with concern that felt too rehearsed. She pressed her finger to her lips, signaling the camera to stay quiet. The doorknob rattled slightly. But Gideon didn't enter. He lingered just long enough for Lila to hold her breath. Finally, his footsteps receded. She exhaled shakily, returning her attention to the phone. This is the second time something strange has happened after I've taken his tea. I lost an entire hour, maybe more. I feel numb. I can't keep ignoring it. She paused, swallowing hard. Whatever he's putting in that tea, maybe it's not what he says it is. She ended the recording, then fumbled with her phone to piece together the screenshots her mother and sister had sent. Audrey's messages were cryptic references to Gideon's medical background, hinting that Lila should be careful with any prescriptions. Her sister's last note read, "Check the bottle." I have a bad feeling. Lila's stomach churned. She decided that from this moment forward, she would document everything. Because if Gideon was the cause of her missing time, she needed proof. With each fleeting second, she felt her life slipping from her grasp. Yet the only way to fight back was to stay conscious of her surroundings, of her memories, and of the man she once trusted. Later that evening, Lila sat on the edge of the living room sofa, across from Gideon. He was polishing his silver-rimmed glasses, the very picture of calm confidence. The overhead light bounced off the framed diplomas lining the wall behind him. Harvard Medical School. Residency at a prestigious neurological institute. Papers and accolades that once filled Lila with pride were now ominous reminders of how easily he could mask dark intentions. So, Gideon said, sliding his glasses back on, let's talk about that herbal supplement I mentioned. He gestured toward an unmarked bottle on the coffee table. It had no prescription label, no manufacturer's logo, just a plain white container. These capsules are designed to help with your anxiety. You've been struggling with panic episodes, right? Lila forced a small nod. She wasn't about to reveal that she'd started suspecting him of spiking her drinks. Instead, she put on her best neutral expression, the kind that might pass for mild curiosity. Right. How exactly do these help? He smiled, a reassuring grin that had once put all her worries to rest. They stabilize your neurotransmitters, regulate cortisol spikes. Kind of like a gentle mood stabilizer without the side effects of prescription meds. You trust me on this, don't you? There it was, that subtle push. I do, she said carefully, but I just want to be informed. I'd like to know the dosage, or at least see some references. His expression flickered. A fraction of a second's annoyance, maybe. Then his practiced composure. Of course. I can put together some reading material for you. But I think it's simpler if you just trust my professional opinion. I am your husband and your doctor, unofficially, that is. She reached for the bottle, turning it over in her hands. It was sealed, but easy enough to open. She considered asking him to pop a pill himself, just to see if he would. But something stopped her, maybe fear of how he'd react. So instead, she just nodded and set it down gently on the table. Thanks. I appreciate you looking out for me, she managed to say. The phrase felt like a betrayal to herself, but she had to maintain the facade of trust a little longer. Gideon patted her hand. You know I only want what's best for you. He angled the conversation smoothly, asking about her day, her painting, her mother. Lila answered mechanically. Her real focus was on the hidden camera now positioned in the corner of the bookshelf behind Gideon, silently capturing this entire exchange. He picked up the unmarked bottle, unscrewing the cap with slow deliberation. Why don't we start tonight? He extended a capsule toward her. It sat in his palm like a tiny white seed, menacing in its simplicity. She felt her pulse quicken. For a moment, she thought of refusing outright. But she reminded herself that if she was going to get concrete proof, she had to act natural. She took the capsule, rolled it between her fingers, and pretended to swallow it with a gulp of water. She smiled at him, parted her lips slightly, and let him see there was no pill hidden under her tongue. Meanwhile, she deftly palmed the capsule under the guise of taking a second sip. Gideon gave an approving nod. That's my girl, he said, voice gentle, though his eyes seemed to probe her reaction. She forced a yawn. I feel tired already, maybe I'll turn in. He stood, leaning in to kiss her forehead. Good idea. Get some rest. As she walked to their bedroom, the capsule clutched secretly in her hand, Lila felt a cold determination form in her chest. She would test this pill, find out what was inside, and finally have the evidence she needed. If Gideon was lying about these so-called herbal supplements, then it was only a matter of time before he slipped up again. But until she had proof, she had to keep playing the role of the unsuspecting wife. Because if Gideon suspected she knew his secret, there was no telling what he might do next. It was well past midnight when Lila found herself standing in Gideon's home office. She'd waited until she heard him turn the shower on, his routine post-workout rinse. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the faint rush of water through the pipes. Her heartbeat felt impossibly loud in her ears. She approached the desk, running her hand over its polished mahogany surface. On one side, a sleek brass handle jutted out from a drawer, an oddly fancy handle that Gideon had installed himself. She tried it gently, only to discover it was locked. A locked drawer in Gideon's own office wasn't inherently suspicious. He was a doctor, after all, and might keep private files. But something about his entire aura lately, the secrecy, the unmarked pills, the strange teas, made her certain that whatever was behind that brass handle was key to her predicament. She knelt, examining the lock. It wasn't a standard model, it had a near-invisible keyhole. She tried to jiggle it quietly, but it wouldn't budge. Footsteps. The distinct sound of them heading toward the office. She froze. The shower must have been shorter than usual. Panic shot through her, adrenaline crashing through her system. She glanced around desperately for somewhere to hide. The broad mahogany desk was the only cover. With trembling hands, she crept underneath it, pressing her body close to the back panel. She carefully lifted the front panel's edge to create a tiny gap to see through. A moment later, Gideon entered. His hair was damp, and he wore a dark robe loosely tied at the waist. He carried a small silver key, which he slipped into the lock of the very drawer Lila had been attempting to open. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She watched as Gideon pulled out a manila folder. Even from her awkward angle, she could see a swirl of pictures, some text, an official-looking seal. He flipped through the pages quickly, then removed a sheet. He placed it in a different folder and locked everything back up again. He turned, pausing by the office window. Lila could see his profile, the taut line of his jaw as he stared into the darkness outside. After a tense minute, he switched off the overhead light and exited, leaving the room in an eerie glow from the street lamp outside. Under the desk, Lila's lungs begged for air. She waited until the house fell silent once more. Then, inching her way out from under the desk, she exhaled shakily. Her heart hammered. She stepped over to the door, pressing an ear to the corridor. When she was certain Gideon had gone upstairs, she clicked on her phone's flashlight for a brief moment. She aimed it at the desk's lock, noting its design. If she could get a closer look or maybe find that silver key, she might uncover Gideon's secrets. A whisper lingered in the room, her own voice in her head, Myra's file. She wasn't sure why those words came to her, but a faint memory stirred of Gideon mentioning a patient named Myra months ago, back when they'd first started dating. Her mind reeled with possibilities. That folder might hold medical records. Maybe it held something far darker. She wouldn't sleep that night, she knew that much for sure. She left the office, careful to leave every object precisely as she'd found it. If Gideon suspected she was snooping, he'd become even more guarded. She made her way back to the bedroom, her nerves still alight. The locked drawer, the suspicious manila folder. It all felt like a puzzle piece slotting into place. She had to know more, and she would. The question burning in her mind was how many more locked compartments, literal or metaphorical, existed in their marriage. And how long could she pretend normalcy before Gideon's calm facade shattered? The next morning, Lila received an unexpected visitor. Raina, Gideon's younger sister, arrived unannounced, knocking on the front door with a smug grin already plastered on her face. She wore oversized sunglasses and carried a designer handbag slung over her shoulder. The moment Lila opened the door, Raina pushed her way inside, glancing around with haughty disapproval. "Well, aren't you a sight?" Raina commented, lifting her sunglasses to reveal narrow, appraising eyes. She scanned Lila up and down, as if sizing up how frazzled she looked. "Did you just wake up?" Lila smoothed down her messy hair, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, actually. Didn't expect company so early. Gideon's at the hospital." She tried to keep the annoyance out of her voice. Raina's visits usually spelled trouble. She had a knack for stirring drama. Raina flopped onto the living room couch. "Of course he is. My brother, the workaholic. So how are you handling his quirks?" She smirked, crossing her legs. "Quirks?" Lila asked, throat tightening a little. Did Raina know something about Gideon's behavior? Raina shrugged. "He's always been controlling. Even with me, growing up. Always telling me what to eat, what to drink, which hobbies were beneficial for my brain. I swear, if I had to hear him lecture me about toxins one more time," she rolled her eyes. "But hey, if you like being told what's best for you, all the power to you." Lila's insides twisted. She took a seat on the chair opposite the couch, crossing her arms. "I'm guessing that's why you're here, to weigh in on our marriage?" A slow, self-satisfied grin spread over Raina's face. "You're quick on the uptake, Lila. I'm here because Gideon asked me to check on you. Something about you being anxious lately. He's worried you're not sleeping and might get paranoid." "Paranoid," Lila echoed, her voice colder than she intended. She forced a polite laugh. "Well, I appreciate the concern. Raina tilted her head. You know, if you need a break, come hang out with me. We can have a spa day, do some yoga, maybe get you on a better diet. Trust me, I've been around controlling men before, my father was the same. Just don't let my brother drive you completely nuts. She flicked an invisible speck of dust off her designer skirt. For a split second, Lila considered confiding in Raina. But something held her back. Raina's brand of concern was rarely genuine. She thrived on gossip and drama, always ready to spark arguments just to watch them burn. If Lila told her about the suspicious tea, the blackouts, or the locked drawer, she might turn around and feed that information to Gideon, or worse, turn it into a family spectacle. Still, Raina's words hinted at a history of controlling tendencies. That was valuable intel, if only to confirm what Lila was already seeing. Thanks, she said finally. I'll keep it in mind. Raina stood, smoothing her outfit. All right, I'm off. Got to meet some friends for brunch. Gideon asked me to drop by with these. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small container of more herbal capsules. She set them on the kitchen counter. He said you ran out. Don't skip a dose, sweetie. Her tone dripped with an odd mixture of faux sympathy and condescension. Lila's jaw tightened, but she accepted the container with a forced smile. As Raina swept out the door, the air felt charged, like a storm about to break. Raina's mocking attitude might have been infuriating, but she had unintentionally confirmed Lila's suspicions. Gideon had a pattern of controlling behaviors, even within his own family. Alone in the living room, Lila turned the container over in her hands. She felt the weight of it, knowing that more capsules likely meant more blackouts if she fell for Gideon's manipulations. She set it down gently beside the first bottle, her mind racing with questions. If Raina was willing to feed Gideon's narrative, this idea that Lila was anxious and paranoid, then Lila had better watch her back. She was surrounded by people who believed Gideon's every word, or at least pretended to. She glanced at the clock on the wall. The best she could do now was plan her next move carefully. She would gather her evidence, keep her guard up, and figure out if Raina's role in this web of secrets would help or harm her. Because if Gideon was content to lie through his sister's teeth, Lila needed to be ready for anything. Days later, the bitter aroma of Gideon's tea once again wafted through the kitchen. Lila watched from the corner of her eye as he stirred the steaming liquid in her favorite teacup. This time, she felt more prepared, less fearful, more determined. She had a small glass vial hidden in her cardigan pocket, the perfect vessel to capture the tea without arousing suspicion. Here you go, honey, Gideon said, placing the teacup before her with a practiced smile. His hair was neatly combed, and he wore pressed slacks and a crisp shirt, as though he were heading to another important day at the hospital. The normalcy of his appearance clashed violently with Lila's internal dread. She lifted the cup to her lips and feigned a small sip, letting the hot liquid brush just her lips while refusing to inhale any more than a faint taste. Her stomach churned from even that minimal contact, but her expression remained calm. She set the cup down, giving Gideon a quick nod of thanks. Drink up, he coaxed, voice gentle yet insistent. She watched him head to the living room. The moment he was out of sight, she carefully poured the tea into the glass vial. A single droplet escaped and slid down the cup's exterior, but she quickly wiped it away with a napkin. She topped off the remainder with regular hot water from the kettle so the cup appeared nearly full. Then she pretended to take slow sips, making small noises to convince Gideon if he happened to overhear. The entire act felt surreal. She'd never imagined a life where she'd have to trick her own husband, one who swore to love her unconditionally. And yet, as she sealed the vial and slipped it back into her pocket, she felt a rush of satisfaction. She had tangible proof now, the mysterious tea that had been messing with her mind. In the living room, Gideon's phone rang. She heard him answer in his professional tone, discussing a patient who was apparently experiencing atypical neurological responses. The terms he used, somnambulistic episodes, catatonic states, made Lila's skin crawl. She couldn't help but wonder if he was using that same clinical detachment when analyzing her. Finishing her facade of sipping, she stood and cleared the dishes, rinsing out the teacup carefully so no visible residue remained. Every move she made felt calculated. She wouldn't give Gideon a single clue that she was onto him. Later that night, locked in the privacy of her home office, she recorded another vlog entry. She held up the vial for the camera to see. "I have it," she whispered, voice crackling with a blend of nerves and triumph. "The tea that's been making me black out, or worse. I'm going to get this tested, find out exactly what's in it. Maybe I can take it to a lab or—" A soft click from somewhere outside made her freeze. She strained her ears. Footsteps or just the house settling? Seconds ticked by in agonizing silence. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner. She exhaled and continued in a low whisper, one step at a time. "I'll do this quietly. But at least now, I'm not drinking it. I'm not going to let him keep drugging me without consequences." She ended the recording, carefully tucking the vial into a drawer she could lock from the inside. Then she locked that drawer and hid the key. A small victory in a war she never asked to fight. But it gave her hope. Soon, she thought, the truth would be on her side, and Gideon would have no place to hide. The next morning, Lila rewatched footage from her makeshift cat cam, which she had cleverly hidden in a decorative cat figurine on a bookshelf overlooking the kitchen. She fast-forwarded through hours of mundane footage, just Gideon walking in and out, rummaging through the fridge, answering phone calls, until she stumbled upon the critical moment. The screen showed Gideon standing at the kitchen counter, carefully tipping white powder into the teapot. He glanced over his shoulder, as if to ensure no one was watching, then stirred methodically. The camera caught everything in stark clarity, his purposeful movement, the small grin on his face, and the moment he patted the teapot side as if satisfied with his work. Lila froze the frame, her heart pounding. This was the visual proof she needed. She used editing software to zoom in, drawing a red circle around the small glass jar he was using. Though the label was partially obscured, it definitely wasn't any standard herbal supplement. In the background audio, she could faintly hear him humming a tune under his breath, so casual, so confident that she'd never suspect. She saved the video file twice, once on her computer and once on an external hard drive. Her mind raced with questions. Should she confront him? Should she immediately report him to the police? Or should she gather more evidence? She weighed her options, chewing her lip in frustration. Gideon was a respected neurologist with connections. She couldn't just barge into a police station with half the story. The authorities would likely want more than just one video clip, and Gideon could easily spin the narrative to discredit her. Instead, she decided to store this as her secret weapon. She emailed a copy to her best friend, Vivien, with a cryptic note, "Hold on to this for me. Don't open unless I say so." Then she locked the original thumb drive in her painting studio safe. If Gideon discovered her knowledge, he might try to destroy the evidence. Sitting there, adrenaline coursing through her, Lila realized she was on the edge of a tightrope. One misstep, and Gideon would either realize she was onto him, or worse, accelerate his twisted agenda. She needed a plan, and quickly. Her eyes flicked back to the paused screen. Gideon's face, caught mid-frame, looked oddly triumphant. The sight made her stomach twist in revulsion and heartbreak. She minimized the video, then clicked record on her phone, capturing her reaction while it was still raw. "I found it," she said. "I can't ignore it anymore. My husband is literally drugging me. I'm trying to keep it together. If anyone finds this after the fact, please know I tried to gather what I needed to stop him. This is my truth." The tension in her voice was tangible. She ended the recording abruptly, feeling tears threaten to spill down her cheeks. Yet her determination outweighed her fear. At last, she had the cold, hard proof. Now she could fight back. The following week, Lila set up an appointment with her neurologist, Dr. Keating, pretending to follow Gideon's suggestion. She hoped to confide in a medical professional outside of Gideon's orbit, someone who might confirm her suspicions or at least take her concerns seriously. However, the moment she entered Dr. Keating's office, her heart sank. Gideon was already there, leaning against a countertop, arms folded across his chest. It took everything in her not to show her shock. She mustered a weak smile and forced her gaze to remain neutral. Clearly, Gideon was ensuring he stayed one step ahead. "Hey, honey," Gideon said smoothly, placing a hand on her shoulder in a faux comforting gesture. "I know you wanted to see Dr. Keating alone, but I just wanted to provide some background on your recent episodes." Lila stiffened. "Right. Of course." Dr. Keating, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, nodded to Lila in greeting before turning his focus to Gideon's words. "So you said she's been experiencing memory gaps and heightened anxiety?" "Yes," Gideon answered, slipping easily into his clinical tone. "She's exhibited paranoia too, convinced someone might be drugging her. I told her it's stress from her art commissions. She's had trouble sleeping and, well, we're both worried." He gave Lila a meaningful glance, as if urging her to confirm. Her jaw clenched. The nerve of him, diagnosing her in front of a specialist. She cleared her throat. "I appreciate your concern, Gideon, but I'd like to speak with Dr. Keating privately." Patient confidentiality. Dr. Keating hesitated. "Of course. But your husband's a colleague and expressed that your mental health might be at immediate risk. I wanted to evaluate the situation with both of you here first." Her stomach twisted in betrayal. Gideon had masterfully painted her as unstable. It was the classic setup, Dr. Husband leveraging his authority to overshadow her testimony. She tried to steady her voice. "I've been feeling off, yes. But Gideon cut in gently. "She's been paranoid about the supplements. Even though they're simple herbal remedies, she believes they might be harmful." Dr. Keating gave Lila a sympathetic look. It's not uncommon for anxiety to manifest in delusional thinking. "Have you been sleeping well, Mrs. Hastings?" She felt cornered, her attempts to speak overshadowed by Gideon's lead. "Not really," she admitted. "But I also..." Dr. Keating tapped his pen on a notepad. "I'm going to recommend a short-term evaluation at our affiliated psychiatric facility. It's not that I don't believe you, Lila, but sometimes a controlled environment helps us identify if the root cause is biochemical or psychological." Lila's cheeks burned. "A psych ward?" she repeated, trying not to sound too alarmed. "I don't need that. I need someone to test the tea and the pills." Gideon squeezed her hand. "Honey, no one's out to get you. We just want to help you feel safe." His voice was maddeningly calm, designed to make her doubt her own reality. She glanced between them, feeling the weight of Dr. Keating's pity. She realized that in this moment, no matter what she said, they would see her as fragile, unstable, or worse, paranoid. Her own mind felt like it was spinning, part fury at Gideon's gaslighting, part terror at how easily he could manipulate a professional colleague. Eventually, Dr. Keating stood. "I suggest a short observational stay. Maybe 72 hours, just to rule out anything serious. We can conduct thorough neurological tests as well, to see if there's any physiological cause for your memory issues." Every cell in Lila's body screamed that this was a trap. If Gideon got her confined for observation, he'd have full access to her medical decisions, possibly doping her with more substances. She forced a polite, trembling smile. "Let me think about it," she managed, her mind racing for an escape route. The appointment ended with a polite handshake. Gideon guided her out of the office with a gentle hand on her back, the picture of a supportive husband. She seethed inside but kept quiet. She realized she'd underestimated his reach and his willingness to destroy her credibility. Standing in the sunlight outside the clinic, Lila felt anything but free. "We'll talk about it at home," Gideon said softly, his words laced with quiet menace. She said nothing, just stared at the ground. Deep down, she knew that the next move in this twisted game had to be hers, and it had to be bold, before Gideon had her locked away as a delusional wife. Lila's chance came on a Sunday morning, just as she was about to lose all hope of gaining the upper hand. She and Gideon were at the breakfast table with his sister, Raina, who had invited herself over yet again. The conversation was casual. Raina bragged about her recent shopping spree, Gideon hummed in mild approval, and Lila quietly picked at her eggs. Then Gideon offered the same tea. "I made extra," he announced, pouring 2 cups, one for Lila, one for Raina. "It'll relax you both." Lila's heart pounded. She glanced at Raina, who smirked as if to say, "Don't mind me, I'm just here to watch the show." But an idea sparked in Lila's mind. She recalled the day Raina collapsed from exhaustion after a wild night out, how Gideon had fussed over her. Now, she wondered what would happen if Raina consumed the same concoction that Gideon had been giving her. It was an impulsive thought, yet it promised a possible revelation. If Raina showed symptoms, it would confirm Lila's suspicions and Gideon's guilt in front of the very sister who dismissed Lila's concerns. Gideon set Lila's cup in front of her, then Raina's. Lila eyed the liquid. It had that familiar bitter scent, the faint swirl of undissolved powder. She forced a smile, reached over, and casually nudged the cups as though adjusting them. Her pulse drummed in her ears. She'd practiced the motion secretly, a small tilt, a tap. In one fluid movement, she switched the cups. Raina, oblivious, kept talking. "So I was telling my personal trainer," she trailed off, spotting Lila's fumbling. "What are you doing?" Lila laughed nervously. "Oh, sorry. I thought mine was the one closer to me, but the handles got swapped. Don't mind me." She lifted what was now Raina's cup, taking a pretend sip to maintain the illusion. It was a minuscule taste, enough to appear convincing but not enough to swallow any real amount. Raina rolled her eyes. "Whatever." She returned to her story, then picked up the other cup, originally meant for Lila, and took a deep gulp. Lila's breath caught. At that moment, Gideon lifted his head, eyes narrowing as he watched Raina's unintentional consumption. Something flickered in his gaze, alarm, perhaps, but he quickly masked it. He turned to Lila. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked pointedly. Lila feigned calm. "I'm fine." "Why wouldn't I be?" Raina drank again, oblivious. Gideon set his own cup down. "Raina, maybe you should slow down," he suggested, voice unnaturally tight. Raina shrugged, draining the cup. "Why? It's just tea, right?" Inside, Lila's mind screamed in triumph. If Gideon had put something dangerous in there, Raina would soon exhibit the symptoms. For all her irritating snark, Raina didn't deserve actual harm. But Lila needed to know if Gideon would react, or if Raina would shrug off the effects. The stakes had never felt so high. Seconds later, Raina's eyelids fluttered. She put a hand to her temple. "Weird," she mumbled. "I feel a little dizzy." Gideon jumped up, forcing a strained laugh. "Maybe you just got up too fast. Why don't you lie down?" He moved to take her arm, but she swatted him away. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her speech was already slurring slightly. She shook her head as if trying to clear a haze. She squinted at the remaining tea in her cup. "What is this?" Lila's heart pounded. The tension in the room was electric. Gideon shot Lila a look, and she could almost feel the fury behind his eyes. He knew. He realized she'd switched the cups. And now, he had to decide what to do with Raina collapsing right in front of them. Raina slumped forward over her plate, knocking her half-eaten omelette onto the table with a messy splatter. Her hair fell across her face, and her body twitched in short, sharp spasms. The suddenness of it made Lila's heart leap into her throat. Gideon sprang into action, catching Raina before she hit the floor. He held her upright, glancing quickly at Lila. "Call 911, he barked, voice cracking with an edge of panic. This was not the controlled, composed Gideon she knew. This was a man who'd lost control of his carefully orchestrated scenario. Lila grabbed her phone, fingers trembling, and dialed emergency services. "My sister-in-law, she's having a seizure or something," she blurted into the phone, giving their address. She glanced at Raina, her eyes rolled back in her head, body slackening. The operator asked for details. Were there any drugs involved, any known allergies? Lila's throat went dry. If she mentioned the tea, Gideon might intervene or spin the story somehow. She gave partial details, focusing on Raina's immediate symptoms. In the background, Raina's convulsions slowed, replaced by shallow, ragged breaths. Gideon gently lowered her to the ground, placing a hand under her head. His face was a mix of real fear and calculated control as he tried to keep Raina stable. Lila's phone call ended when she heard sirens approaching outside. Everything felt surreal. She could see the tension in Gideon's shoulders, the panic in his eyes. There was no question that the substance he'd spiked the tea with was responsible for Raina's collapse. The comment section of a hypothetical video would have been on fire. Did Gideon just get caught in his own trap? But in real life, it was terrifying. Paramedics rushed in. One knelt beside Raina, checking her vitals. The other looked to Gideon for an explanation, and Gideon, still in his role as a doctor, rattled off medical jargon about potential low blood sugar or dehydration, ignoring the possibility of toxins in the tea. Lila stood to the side, filming discreetly with her phone. Her hands shook, but she steadied the lens, capturing Gideon's frantic instructions. Raina's body was lifted onto a gurney, her face pale and clammy. They strapped an oxygen mask over her mouth. The severity of the situation hit Lila hard. This was no staged stunt. Raina was genuinely in danger. As they wheeled Raina out, Gideon turned to Lila, voice taut. "We're going to the hospital. You stay here." Lila shook her head. "She's my sister-in-law. I'm coming." He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "Don't push this. You've done enough." She met his gaze head-on. "I'm not letting you manipulate the narrative, Gideon." He pulled back, giving her a chilling glare, but ultimately turned away to follow the paramedics. Lila grabbed her purse and phone, hurrying after them. She'd come too far to back down now. She needed to see how Raina's condition would be explained, if Gideon would try to cover up the tea's role in this medical emergency. The ambulance lights flashed against the early morning sky, painting the street in red and blue strobe. Neighbors peeked from behind blinds, curious about the commotion. Lila climbed into her car and followed the ambulance to the hospital. Her pulse wouldn't slow. She kept replaying that moment of Raina convulsing, the taste of the near-identical tea lingering on her lips. Despite Raina's incessant snark and condescension, Lila found herself praying for her quick recovery. A horrifying guilt flickered through her. What if I took this too far? But then again, would Gideon have kept drugging Lila if she hadn't switched the cups? This forced him to face the consequences of his actions. As she drove, tears threatened to blur her vision. She blinked them away, gripping the steering wheel tight. She had evidence saved, hidden away. And now, she had a witness, Raina, who might recall how that cup of tea was meant for Lila, not her. The question was, would she remember? And if she did, would she turn her fury against Gideon, or Lila? At the hospital, Lila rushed into the emergency room to find Raina being wheeled through the swinging double doors into a restricted area. Gideon had vanished into one of the exam rooms, presumably explaining the situation to the medical staff. Unable to follow them immediately, Lila approached the paramedics who had responded at the house. One was filling out paperwork near the ER entrance. "Excuse me," she said softly, summoning her courage. "I'm Raina Hastings' sister-in-law. Do you know what my husband told you happened?" The paramedic glanced at his notes. He mentioned that she might have a history of epileptic seizures, said it was possible she forgot her meds. But we couldn't confirm anything. Are you aware of any condition like that? Lila's heart sank. No, she's never had seizures in her life. My husband must have been mistaken. Her voice wavered slightly, but she forced a polite smile. Thank you. I'll lie. A direct, fabricated medical history. She pressed the record button on her phone, holding it by her side so the paramedic wouldn't notice. So, you're saying he told you she was epileptic? The paramedic nodded, still writing. Yep, that's what he said. We treat these calls at face value. You might want to get that clarified with her primary doctor. He offered a sympathetic shrug, then headed off to file the paperwork. Breath unsteady, Lila stepped aside and checked the phone's audio. She had it on record, Gideon's deception. Another piece of the puzzle. She moved to the waiting area, scanning for Gideon. The moment she spotted him down the hallway, she lifted her phone, filming discreetly as he spoke to a nurse. He was calm, in control again, leaning toward the nurse. Lila couldn't hear every word, but she caught fragments: pre-existing condition, in shock, monitor for side effects. She wanted to storm in and shout the truth, that Gideon had drugged Raina with something that caused those convulsions. But if she did that without further proof, Gideon would undermine her claims again. The staff might see her as an unhinged spouse interfering with a doctor's professional assessment. Instead, she stuck to her plan: document, record, and gather evidence. She tapped into her phone's notes app, writing down everything: the lies about epilepsy, the paramedic statement, Gideon's conversation with the nurse. Her heart pounded with each keystroke, but she clung to the belief that truth would eventually prevail. After what felt like an eternity, Gideon emerged from the exam room. He saw Lila and approached, forcing a tight smile. Raina's stabilized, he said. They're running some tests. It looks like it might be a severe drop in blood pressure and blood sugar. Nothing fatal. She swallowed, nodding carefully. That's good. But you told the paramedics she had epilepsy. He shrugged, feigning innocence. I thought she'd had a seizure in the past. Maybe I was mistaken. In the heat of the moment, you say things. Her eyes narrowed. Or maybe you're covering for something. He stiffened. Don't start. Then his tone shifted, as if he remembered they were in a public setting. Listen, Lila, everyone's on edge. Let's just be grateful Raina's going to be okay. She pressed her lips together. I want to see her. He hesitated. She's resting now. Let the doctors do their job. I'll let you know when you can go in. She nodded curtly, stepping away. The tension between them was palpable, a silent standoff. She knew he was furious, that he suspected she'd orchestrated Raina's collapse. But for now, they had to play their roles as concerned family members. Taking a seat in the waiting area, Lila kept her phone close. She scanned the anxious faces of strangers waiting on their loved ones, each with a story of worry and hope. She wondered what they would think if they knew the twisted circumstances behind Raina's hospitalization. A wave of dread washed over her. Gideon might manipulate Raina, the nurses, even the test results, if he could. She had to stay vigilant. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each minute feeling like an eternity in the sterile glow of the hospital lights. She resolved to keep her camera rolling, because if Gideon lied again, she would have the receipts. Later that evening, Lila found herself alone in the house for the first time since Raina's collapse. Gideon had stayed at the hospital to oversee Raina's care, though Lila suspected he was more focused on damage control. Capitalizing on the opportunity, she marched straight to Gideon's locked office drawer, determined to find that silver key. It wasn't on his desk or in any obvious hiding spot. She rummaged through old jackets in the closet, patted down pockets, checked beneath the seat cushions. Finally, near a stack of medical journals on a high shelf, she found a small metal box. Inside it lay a single silver key, unassuming yet potent with hidden secrets. Her hands shook as she inserted it into the drawer's lock. With a quiet click, the drawer slid open. She peered inside to see multiple folders, each labeled with a single name or coded reference. One read, Mira G. Carefully, she pulled it out. The edges were worn, as though it had been referenced many times. Opening it, she found pages of clinical notes, diagrams of brain scans, and ominous references to experimental drug trials. There were also several photographs, a young woman with haunted eyes, gaunt cheeks, lying in a hospital bed. Some images showed her post-mortem, blurry coroner's photos with official stamps. Lila felt bile rise in her throat. Myra's lifeless features made it clear this patient hadn't survived. She flipped through the notes, heart pounding. Words like unresponsive, complications from unapproved medication, and possible overdose littered the pages. Another line scrawled in red pen read, subject exhibited signs of confusion, memory lapses prior to final episode. Lila's mind reeled. Memory lapses, just like hers. She snatched her phone and took photos of everything, her hands trembling. This was damning evidence. Gideon had apparently been involved in experimental treatments that led to a patient's death. The coroner's report even hinted that the cause was suspect. If Gideon had never been officially implicated, perhaps he'd escaped blame. But the question lingered, why was Gideon still referencing these files, and did it connect to Lila's current ordeal? Sifting further, she discovered an old black and white photograph of Gideon in a lab coat, standing beside a sedation table. He looked younger but equally intense, a hint of pride in his posture. The back of the photo had scribbled notes about dosage levels and cooperative sedation. Her breath ragged, she tucked Myra's file under her arm and rummaged for more. Another folder contained references to clinical trials, GFR 72, which matched some documents Vivien had once mentioned in a true crime forum post about suspicious drug trials. Lila's stomach churned. Gideon might be continuing that same questionable research, using his medical clout to hide the ethical lines he was crossing. A sudden fear gripped her. What if he planned to replicate Myra's fate with me? She slammed the drawer shut, locked it, and replaced the key where she found it to avoid suspicion. Holding the folder tight, she fled to her studio, where she locked the door behind her. She quickly snapped additional pictures with her phone, making sure to capture every page. A swirl of emotions overcame her, horror, betrayal, fury. She flipped to one particularly gruesome coroner photo, partially blurred, but still showing Myra's eyes wide open in a final, frozen stare. Lila had to set it aside, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Mira," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "I'm so sorry." She wondered who Mira had been before Gideon's experiments. A vibrant young woman with dreams and plans, cut short by one man's obsession with pushing medical boundaries. Lila's entire body felt cold. Gideon's capacity for deception, for cruelty, went deeper than she'd imagined. Steeling herself, she packed up the file, ready to hide it with her other evidence. She had to bring Gideon down, not just for herself, but for Mira, and possibly Raina if her condition didn't improve. The darkness swirling behind Gideon's doctorly facade was monstrous, and Lila had just opened the gateway into it. Unable to shake the haunting images from Myra's file, Lila retreated to her art studio and locked the door. She set her phone on the easel's small ledge, hit record, and began speaking quietly to the camera. "There was a patient named Mira," she began, her voice trembling with the weight of her discovery. "She died under suspicious circumstances tied to Gideon's experimental drug trials. Her medical notes reference confusion, memory lapses, the same symptoms I've been having. And the official cause of death was labeled an overdose, but the coroner seemed unsure if it was suicide or homicide." She paused, a surge of guilt and anger coursing through her. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I have the files. I can't show them on camera, too graphic, but I promise you, they're horrifying. I don't know how Gideon covered this up. I don't know if the hospital ever investigated." The studio lights cast shadows on the partially completed painting on her easel. The composition was one of swirling flames around a central figure, an image that, in hindsight, felt eerily symbolic of the turmoil raging inside her. She wiped her eyes, inhaling sharply. "There's also mention of GFR 72, some trial drug. I think Gideon's testing in on me, he's using me like some kind of lab rat. And Raina just got a taste of it. If she makes it through, maybe that'll be enough for her to realize Gideon's not some well-meaning brother, but a manipulator. Setting down her phone, she paced the studio. The floor creaked beneath her slippers as she replayed the timeline in her head, the bizarre teas, the capsules, the memory losses, Gideon's lies to the paramedics. Everything formed a chilling mosaic of premeditated betrayal. She resumed her recording, voice hushed but urgent. I found coroner photos of Mira. I can't get her face out of my mind. I know this is the midpoint of my story, but I swear, if I ever get out of this, I'm going to make sure the world knows what Gideon did to her. She pressed pause, slumping onto her stool. The emotional weight was crushing. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, but fear and adrenaline kept her from sleep. Could she be repeating Myra's fate, drugged until she slipped into a final accidental overdose? A memory surfaced, Gideon once bragging about how his research would change the landscape of neurology forever. She recalled him staying late at the hospital, referencing hush-hush projects. She'd admired his ambition then, never suspecting the moral lines he might cross. The quiet hum of the air conditioner broke the stillness. Closing her eyes, Lila mustered the energy to start painting, letting the brush glide over the canvas. Each stroke felt cathartic, an attempt to reclaim her sense of self in a world turned upside down. She lost track of time, painting frantically, images of Myra's tragedy fueling her brush. When she finally looked up, the once half-finished painting of swirling flames had transformed into something more raw, more anguished, a woman with outstretched arms consumed by chaos. It felt like a tribute to Mira, to every victim who never saw justice. A single tear dripped onto the paint, mixing with a red hue. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Not me. I won't go down quietly." 2 days later, Lila finally got permission to see Raina in the hospital. She entered the stark white room, her pulse hammering. Raina lay in bed, propped up by pillows, her face still pale but eyes fluttering open at the sound of footsteps. "Raina," Lila said softly, pulling a chair close. "How are you feeling?" Raina gave a weak snort. "Like I got hit by a truck, thanks for asking." Her voice was raspy, her usual snark dialed down by pure exhaustion. Lila tentatively reached for Raina's hand. "I'm sorry this happened to you." The doctor said it was a sudden drop in blood pressure combined with an unknown substance. She avoided Gideon's name, unsure if Raina knew yet. Raina closed her eyes briefly, wincing. "I keep remembering bits and pieces. I was at your house, complaining about the tea." Wait, her eyes snapped open, locking onto Lila's. "You switched the cups, didn't you?" A current of tension ran through the room. Lila swallowed hard, not denying it. She said nothing, but her fingers tightened around Raina's hand. The hospital machinery beeped steadily, a cold metronome to their confrontation. Raina's expression twisted in confusion and anger. "That cup was meant for you. Why would you do that?" It took all of Lila's courage to meet Raina's gaze. "Because Gideon's been drugging me. I needed to see if I was crazy, if I was just imagining it. I'm sorry, I never wanted you hurt. But if you felt the same reaction, then it means I'm not paranoid. Something's seriously wrong with that tea." For a moment, Raina seemed ready to lash out. But then her face crumpled, and tears glistened in her eyes. "I heard Gideon telling the nurses that I had some neurological condition. They looked at me like I was some fragile psyche case." She exhaled shakily. "What's going on, Lila?" Quietly, Lila explained everything, Gideon's suspicious teas, the blackouts, the memory gaps, Myra's file. She kept her voice low, mindful of passing hospital staff. Raina listened, her expression morphing from shock to denial to grim realization. When Lila finished, Raina's cheeks were flushed. "That psycho," she spat, eyes blazing. Her breath hitched as she pressed a hand to her temple. "I always thought Gideon was controlling, but I never imagined," her voice trailed off. An uncomfortable silence settled. Raina's eyes brimmed with guilt. I'm sorry for not believing you, she whispered. I chalked your anxiety up to you just being dramatic. I never dreamed Gideon would do something like this. Lila's own eyes moistened with tears she fought to keep at bay. I understand. He's good at acting sincere. Everyone trusts him because he's a doctor. She squeezed Raina's hand gently. But you believe me now, right? Raina nodded, her voice trembling. I do. And once I get out of here, I'm going to demand some answers. A flicker of the old Raina surfaced, her fierce spirit, the determination that once channeled itself into sarcastic jabs. In that shared moment, they were no longer adversaries. They were allies. Lila's heart lifted slightly, a spark of hope flaring to life. If Raina sided with her, Gideon would lose one of his biggest enablers. Before they could say more, the door creaked open. Gideon stepped in. He froze at the sight of Lila and Raina clasping hands, obviously deep in conversation. Lila felt Raina's hand tense. Their eyes silently communicated one thing: we know. Gideon smiled thinly, his gaze flicking between them. Good to see you two finally making up, he remarked smoothly, but Lila caught a flash of worry in his eyes. He placed a bouquet of lilies on Raina's nightstand. Hope you're feeling better, sis. Raina's jaw tightened. Much better. Thanks to the doctors here, not you. The tension was palpable. Gideon offered a puzzled chuckle, but Lila saw his shoulders tighten. She stood, stepping back. Even though the hospital room was bright and sterile, shadows seemed to loom behind Gideon, following him like a warning. That evening, Lila found temporary refuge at her best friend Vivien's apartment. Vivien, a true crime enthusiast and amateur researcher, had more than once dabbled in exposing local scandals on online forums. Lila knew she could trust her, or at least hoped so. They sat at Vivien's small kitchen table, laptops open, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The city lights twinkled through the window, a far cry from the tension at the hospital. Lila handed Vivien a USB drive containing the CAT cam video and photos from Myra's file. Holy, Vivien's eyes widened as she clicked through the files. This is some messed up stuff, Lila. Lila sipped a glass of water, her throat too dry from anxiety. I need your help. You said you were on that true crime forum that investigates questionable deaths, right? Well, Gideon's possibly linked to one. Vivien opened another browser tab, the reflection of the screen dancing across her glasses. Let me pull up the archives. There was a thread about a patient who died under unusual circumstances at a local hospital. Could be Mira. As she typed, an animated map graphic appeared on the screen, tracing out known locations of experimental clinical trials. Lila's pulse jumped. That's Gideon's name right there, on that participant list, Vivien whispered, pointing to an entry labeled Dr. G. Hastings, Neurological Trials, GFR 72. Lila's stomach twisted. He's been peddling that drug for years, apparently. And now, he's testing it on me and Raina. Vivien shook her head in disbelief. This is huge. You have to go to the authorities. But you'll need a lot more evidence, like the actual composition of the substance. Lab results, official documents. The cops might want more than a hidden camera video. A sick feeling settled in Lila's gut. And Gideon has half the police force or their relatives as his patients. He's well connected. Vivien leaned back, tapping her pen on the table. I could leak these files to some investigative journalists I know. It might prompt them to dig into his clinical trials. But it'll put a giant target on your back. You ready for that? Lila considered it. Images of Myra's coroner photos flashed in her mind. He's already tried to ruin me. He was close to having me committed. And Raina nearly died. She took a shaky breath. I'd rather risk it than let him keep doing this. Vivien's eyes filled with concern. We have to move carefully. Once Gideon realizes these files are public, he'll bury whatever else he's doing. We need a direct link, like a statement from Raina or another victim's family. Lila nodded. Raina's on my side now, but she's still recovering. And there might be more victims we don't even know about. Vivien's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then grimaced. Just got a message from the forum moderator. They heard about a hush-hush settlement involving a Dr. Hastings a few years back. Probably Gideon paying off a grieving family. I'll keep digging. A wave of gratitude and fear washed over Lila. She reached across the table and squeezed Vivien's hand. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Vivien gave a small smile. We're going to nail this creep to the wall. She paused, eyes darkening. But watch your back, okay? Men like Gideon don't go down without a fight. Lila nodded, swallowing hard. She stared at the glowing laptop screen, the digital map connecting red dots across the city. Each dot was a potential victim, a life Gideon might have shattered. Her resolve hardened. Whatever it took, she was going to stop him before he claimed another life, or ended hers. Lila's heart thundered when she opened her front door to find Detective Nyla Boon standing on the porch. A tall woman with close-cropped hair and a steady gaze, Boon flashed a badge. Mrs. Hastings? I'd like to talk to you about your husband. Stunned, Lila nodded and stepped aside to let her in. Her immediate reaction was a swirl of hope and dread. Hope, because maybe the authorities were finally investigating Gideon. Dread, because Gideon's influence might extend even here. They sat in the living room, and Boon set a small notepad on the coffee table. I understand you've been raising concerns about Dr. Hastings. I'm officially looking into a complaint regarding potential malpractice. I'd like to hear your side. Lila's nerves buzzed. She handed over the USB drive with trembling fingers. This has videos, documents, all the suspicious stuff I've collected. Gideon's been drugging me and his sister, Raina. He did something to a patient named Mira, she died. The words tumbled out in a rush, as though she'd been waiting forever to say them to someone who could help. Boon studied Lila's face carefully. That's a serious accusation. Are you prepared to provide a detailed statement? Lila breathed in, her throat tight. I am. But you have to understand, Gideon's well-connected. If he catches wind of this investigation, he'll do anything to cover his tracks. The detective nodded. I'm aware of his reputation. But I'm here because some of those connections flagged anomalies in his research. I'm not exactly from his circle, I've been assigned because I'm known for being persistent. A flicker of relief washed over Lila. Thank you. Honestly, I just want him stopped. They spent the next hour reviewing the CAT cam footage, the photos from Myra's file, and transcripts of phone recordings Lila had made. Boon's expression remained stoic, but every now and then, her brows knit in concern. When they finished, Boon closed the laptop. This is compelling, but we'll need more concrete proof, like a toxicology report on the substances used in the tea. Also, direct statements from Raina, and anyone else who suspects wrongdoing. Lila nodded. Raina might back me up, if she's strong enough to talk. She's still in the hospital. Boon jotted a note. I'll speak with her. In the meantime, keep this under wraps. Don't confront your husband directly, don't threaten him with what you have. I need prosecutable evidence, not a tip-off that makes him disappear or destroy records. Exhaling slowly, Lila nodded. Understood. At that moment, the front door swung open. Gideon stepped in, pausing when he saw the detective on the couch. His eyes flickered with alarm before he forced a genial smile. Oh, hello there. Something I can help you with, detective? Boon rose, shaking his hand. Just conducting a routine inquiry. I had a few questions about some of your clinical trials. Gideon's smile remained fixed, but Lila noticed his knuckles whiten on the doorknob. Of course. I'm happy to cooperate. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Boon declined politely, gathering her notepad. I'll follow up if I need more information. Mrs. Hastings, thank you for your time. Lila walked Boon to the door, heart pounding. The detective's words echoed in her mind, "Give me something prosecutable." She stood on the porch, watching as Boon headed to her unmarked car, then turned to face Gideon, who was behind her, posture rigid. He closed the door firmly and looked at Lila, his eyes dark with anger. What was that about? His voice was cold, clipped. She met his gaze evenly, adrenaline surging. She's investigating your trials. Something about irregularities. She couldn't reveal she'd told the detective everything, not yet. His lips thinned. Interesting. Well, I'll handle it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Don't ever think you can turn anyone against me. You'll regret it. A chill ran down her spine. She stared him down, refusing to flinch. We'll see, she said, her heart hammering. Inside, fear twisted her stomach, but Detective Boon's arrival felt like the first real spark of hope. Gideon might threaten her, but now she had a shield, a detective who wouldn't be cowed by his status. All she had to do was provide enough evidence for an arrest. No more blackouts. No more fear. She clutched that resolve as she slipped past him, heading to her office. Their battle lines were drawn, and if Gideon thought he could intimidate her into silence, he was sorely mistaken. A week later, Gideon hosted a lavish dinner party at the mansion of one of his influential colleagues, some high-profile fundraiser for neurological research. Lila arrived separately, her chest tight. She knew from Vivien that Detective Boon was quietly building a case. Meanwhile, Raina was finally discharged from the hospital, still groggy and furious at Gideon. The house glimmered with chandeliers and polished marble floors. A hush fell as Gideon took the stage to address the donors, wearing a tailored suit that screamed confidence. He thanked everyone for their generosity, praising their commitment to groundbreaking research. It was all smooth rhetoric, the kind that made onlookers trust his vision. Lila lingered near the back, phone in hand, filming discreetly. Her heart pounded at the audacity of Gideon's performance. She spotted Raina at a nearby table, arms crossed, eyes burning with rage. They exchanged a nod, an unspoken pact to stay vigilant. Halfway through Gideon's speech, the doors burst open. Two uniformed officers entered, followed by Detective Boon in plain clothes. Conversations hushed, guests turned to stare. Gideon paused mid-sentence, confusion flashing across his face. Boon strode forward, producing a warrant. Dr. Gideon Hastings, we need to speak with you immediately regarding your ongoing clinical trials. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. Some donors began whispering frantically. Gideon's face went pale, then swiftly morphed into a calm facade. Detective, this is a private event. Can't this wait until... No, Dr. Hastings, Boon interrupted firmly. I have enough evidence here to justify taking you in for questioning. She held up a sheaf of papers. Allegations include drugging patients without proper consent, falsifying medical records, and potential manslaughter charges in connection to the death of Mira G. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Cameras and phones whipped out, capturing the unfolding drama. Gideon's composure faltered for a split second. Then he forced a thin smile. I see. Let's go somewhere private. Before he could move, two officers stepped forward, one placing a hand on Gideon's shoulder. The tension was palpable, and more than a few guests stood up, alarmed and confused. Across the room, Lila kept filming, her heart in her throat. This was it. The moment they'd all been waiting for. But Gideon, ever the showman, did not go quietly. He glanced around at the donors, then at the cameras, feigning indignation. Detective, we can settle this, he said. All these charges are based on the delusions of an unstable patient, my own wife, who suffers from anxiety. He gestured to Lila. She's been accusing me of all sorts of things. Heat flared in Lila's cheeks. A hush fell over the crowd, many sets of eyes shifting between them. Boon, unflinching, opened a folder. We've reviewed your wife's medical logs and video evidence. We also have testimony from your sister, Lila Hastings, who confirmed you administered the same substance to her. We found your lab records incomplete, your drug logs falsified. She arched an eyebrow. I suggest you come with us. Gideon's jaw tightened. Sirens blared from outside as more squad cars pulled up. The dinner party had transformed into a front row seat for Gideon's downfall. Finally, he surrendered, allowing the officers to handcuff him without further protest. A barrage of phone flashes lit up the moment. Lila's heart hammered, tears of relief and shock blurring her vision. She caught Gideon's gaze as they led him away, and in that brief second, she saw pure venom behind his eyes. He mouthed something she couldn't fully decipher, but it looked suspiciously like, "This isn't over." Trembling, Lila took an unsteady breath. She panned her phone camera around the room, capturing the stunned faces of donors and colleagues. Raina pushed through the crowd, placing a hand on Lila's shoulder. They exchanged a tense, relieved glance. Gideon was in custody, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. Standing on the front steps of the mansion, Lila watched as Gideon was escorted to a patrol car. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated his face in stark relief, revealing a fury that words could barely capture. He turned his head just before ducking into the back seat, locking eyes with Lila through the swirl of bystanders and onlookers. The moment seemed to slow. The overhead street lamp cast an eerie reflection on the patrol car's window. As Gideon settled into the back seat, he mouthed something that looked like, "You'll pay." Another angle, from a smartphone camera, showed Gideon's lips forming the words, "This isn't over." Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. People began speculating, what did he say? Some tried to lip read, others whipped out their phones to replay the moment. The detective gently urged the crowd to step back. Raina appeared beside Lila, shaking her head in disbelief. "He's insane. But it's over now, right?" She squeezed Lila's arm, her expression hopeful. Lila's stomach churned. "I want to believe that." She couldn't deny the chill creeping through her veins. Gideon might be arrested, but if his resources and connections could still help him post bail or twist the narrative, their ordeal wasn't necessarily over. They stayed until the squad car pulled away, watching from the sidewalk as Gideon disappeared into the night, sirens echoing down the street. A flurry of dinner party guests began emerging from the mansion, their conversations a cacophony of shock, gossip, and moral outrage. Some recognized Lila, approached to ask if she was okay, if she needed help. She waved them off politely, not ready to engage with strangers. As the adrenaline subsided, Lila felt a wave of exhaustion crash over her. Raina gently took her by the arm. "Come on. Let's get out of here." They retreated to Raina's car, sinking into the seats in a moment of quiet relief. The air smelled of leather and perfume, an oddly comforting contrast to the chaos of the night. Raina started the engine but didn't drive off immediately. "So, what now?" Lila closed her eyes. "We keep cooperating with Detective Boon. We see if Gideon confesses or tries to fight it. We make sure he doesn't wriggle out of this with his doctor status." Raina nodded, gripping the steering wheel. "And if he threatens you again?" Lila opened her eyes, glancing at the spot where the patrol car had been just moments ago. "I'll be ready," she said quietly. "I'm done letting him control me." The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silent reflection. Once they reached Lila's house, Raina insisted on walking her to the door. Lila managed a small smile, appreciating the gesture. Her mind still buzzed with Gideon's final glare, the shape of his mouth forming a silent promise of retribution. Inside, the house felt emptier without Gideon's presence, a strange mix of relief and leftover fear. Lila flipped on the living room lights, half expecting him to appear around the corner. But he was gone, at least for now. She set her keys on the kitchen counter, noticing the same teacup that had set this all in motion. The memory of its bitter taste still clung to her consciousness, a warning never to be forgotten. She turned to Raina, who stood in the doorway, looking lost. "Thank you," Lila whispered. "For believing me in the end." Raina nodded, crossing her arms. "We're family, despite everything. I'm sorry I didn't see who Gideon really was." Lila walked her to the door, the night's tension still thick. They exchanged a brief hug before Raina departed, leaving Lila alone with her thoughts. She moved through the dark house, turning off stray lights, checking each room as if to confirm Gideon was truly gone. A sense of uneasy victory settled over her. One thing was certain, Gideon's parting words still echoed in her mind. This isn't over. She could only hope the justice system would prove him wrong. A week passed without further incident. Gideon remained in custody, denied bail due to the seriousness of the charges and evidence of potential witness tampering. Detective Boon reached out to Lila, confirming new developments in the case but advising her to stay cautious. During this respite, Lila found solace in her art once more. She rented a small studio uptown, a bright, airy space with large windows overlooking an industrial skyline. The studio smelled of fresh paint and possibility. With her phone set aside, Lila immersed herself in creating a series of paintings she called the Phoenix Sketches. One afternoon, she recorded a short vlog entry, phone propped against a paint can. "It's been a roller coaster. My husband is in jail, awaiting trial. Raina is finally recovering, both physically and emotionally. And I'm free in a way, but still shaken." She paused, glancing at the blank canvas in front of her. "I'm dedicating this series to the idea of rebirth. Rising from ashes, from the destruction Gideon caused. This is for Mira, for me, for anyone who's been gaslit and manipulated." Her brush moved with renewed vigor, each stroke adding swaths of crimson and gold to form the silhouette of a phoenix. She let the music in her headphones guide her, losing track of time as she poured her feelings onto the canvas. She layered vibrant colors, symbolizing resilience and hope. The act of creation felt like therapy, a way to reclaim her identity after the months of confusion and fear. As evening settled, the setting sun cast orange rays across her artwork, making the phoenix glow as if it were alive. Lila set down her brush and picked up her phone, aiming it at the painting. "For the first time in a while, I feel good," she said softly. "Healing isn't linear, but I'm trying to find beauty again." Then she turned the camera on herself. Her eyes still carried traces of the trauma she'd endured, but beneath that, a spark of determination glimmered. "Thank you," she whispered to her unseen audience, the future watchers of her life saga. "For sticking with me through this. For believing the truth when it was hardest to see." She ended the recording, exhaling in relief. Though Gideon's trial loomed ahead, and the path to justice for Mira was still uncertain, she allowed herself this moment of peace. Every brushstroke, every swirl of fiery paint, served as both a tribute to the lost and a promise to herself. Never again would she allow another person to control her narrative. Stepping back, she admired the phoenix in full. It emanated strength, wings outstretched as though ready to take flight. For Lila, it was more than just a painting, it was a mirror reflecting her own journey. Out of the ashes of betrayal, she was rising, determined never to be caged by someone else's deceit again. A few weeks later, after a long day in her studio, Lila returned to her now quiet home. The echoes of Gideon's presence no longer lingered in every corner. Yet a lingering wariness compelled her to check locks and windows, a habit formed by months of paranoia. She headed to the kitchen, deciding to brew a cup of tea for herself, a small, symbolic act. No more unmarked capsules, no more suspicious powders. She meticulously prepared a chamomile blend, sweetening it with a spoonful of honey. The aroma filled the kitchen, reminding her how simple acts could feel liberating after so much darkness. She moved to the living room, the warm mug in hand, setting her phone on the coffee table. She tapped the screen to check social media. Notifications flooded in, her supporters, strangers who'd discovered her story online, art enthusiasts praising her new Phoenix series. So much positivity, so many voices urging her to stay strong and keep sharing her truth. Taking a slow, deliberate sip of the tea, she closed her eyes and savored the warmth. A distant memory of that scratchy, drug-laced tea pricked at her, but she pushed it aside. This was her tea, brewed by her own hand, safe and comforting. Then, from the corner of her vision, she spotted something out of place on the kitchen counter, a small, unfamiliar tea wrapper. Her heart skipped a beat. She set her mug down carefully, rose, and walked over to the wrapper. The label was foreign, not one of the brands she regularly bought. She picked it up, turning it over. No English text, just cryptic symbols. A chill slithered down her spine. Had someone been here? Had Gideon found a way to slip something into her routine even while in custody? The rational side of her mind said it could be a leftover from an old tea stash, or maybe Raina had dropped it off. But her gut told a different story, one laced with dread and the echo of Gideon's final words, "This isn't over." Her hand shook as she reread the symbols on the wrapper. The possibility that someone else, an accomplice perhaps, might still be working on Gideon's behalf haunted her. She glanced back at her mug of chamomile. Paranoia spiked. The tea was honey-sweet, tasted perfectly normal, but was it? Lila grabbed her phone and started filming. Her breath was unsteady, eyes wide. "I just found this," she said, holding the wrapper up to the camera. "I don't recognize it. I didn't buy this. As far as I know, it's never been in my house before. There's no reason for it to be here." She exhaled shakily. "I don't know who put it here or why. But if you're watching this, if something happens, if I relapse or start feeling those symptoms again, please know I didn't do it to myself." Her voice trembled. She tried to steady it. "But I won't let them scare me into hiding. I'll keep fighting." Her gaze drifted from the wrapper back to the steaming mug on the table. She walked over, lifted it to her nose, and inhaled cautiously. It smelled normal. Yet the seed of doubt had been planted. With a determined glint in her eyes, she set the cup down again. No more sips. She stared into the camera, letting the tension build. Then, in a cinematic flourish, she ended the recording, leaving a final shot of the mysterious tea wrapper in her hand. In that moment, Lila knew her story was far from over. But one thing was clear, Lila would keep fighting. She would no longer be a pawn in Gideon's twisted game. For Mira, for Raina, for herself, she was prepared to face the unknown. The end.